If you want something done right, you've got to do it yourself, right? No. As managers, our job is to help other people do things right. And that means being able to delegate and document processes so that there is consistently high-quality work done no matter who is doing it. But figuring out how to let go and having systems in place to create that consistency, it's not always so easy. Well, that's what today's guest is going to unpack for us so that we can all get out of our own way and help our team members succeed. Today's guest is Chris Ronzio. Chris is the founder and CEO of Trainual, a platform transforming how businesses onboard, train, and scale their teams. A lifelong entrepreneur, he helps leaders document and delegate effectively. Chris is also the best-selling author of The Business Playbook, How to Document and Delegate What You Do so your company can grow beyond you. Now, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I share new episodes and other tips for managers every week. Now, here's my conversation with Chris. Thank you so much for joining me today, Chris. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. But before we dive in, I do need to give a shout out to our mutual friend, Salima, who connected us, because I love it when I find incredible guests like yourself through people that I've met in other spaces. It's such a wonderful way to expand my network and get, awesome guests for the show.
Absolutely. What's up, Salima?
We'll have to send her this episode after. Okay, so today we're going to talk about how to delegate through getting things out of your head. And I feel like this is one of the things that I coach managers on so often because we are so used to doing all the things. And the idea that someone else is going to do it instead of us is like so scary and so impossible to imagine. But you have a whole system for training and for delegating and so much more. But I want to hone in on this particular challenge that managers face. So thank you again for coming on today. And maybe we can start with some of the bigger picture. Like, what are the problems that you see with people holding on to work and holding on to things in their head for too long?
Yeah, what I like to say is you have to get your business out of your brain. If everything's stuck in your head, then sometimes it makes you feel important. You feel like this is why I'm important to my company because I know this. But if it's stuck in your head, then it's really a bottleneck for you to ever be able to grow beyond what you're doing today. And so if you want to be able to grow and take on new responsibilities and new projects and new exciting parts of the business, you have to hand off what you've been doing over the years. And so it's something that I think every manager and leader goes through at some point. But it's really hard to let it go at the beginning because that's where you get your sense of validation and self-worth from, is how many items did I check off my to-do list, right?
Completely. And I will say I have that feeling often myself, where even when I know I should delegate something, I'm like, but I'm so good at this and I like doing it. It's so satisfying. And I like, it feels great. And I don't want to give it up, even though it's really not the most important work that I should be doing. So what are the first steps? Right? It sounds like it's almost like a mindset shift is like step one. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, I think first you need to understand if you are going to be a individual contributor forever, or if you really want to grow and develop as a leader and as a manager. And I'm sure people listening to this podcast have made that jump into people management, or at least want to make that jump. And so first, let's cast aside if you want to just be an individual contributor forever, then you are going to continue to fine tune and perfect your skill. You are going to do this thing more efficiently over and over. You're going to charge more for doing that thing. But then you reach some ceiling or some capacity where you can't possibly do this thing anymore by yourself. And that's where we need to make the jump into management and into leveraging other people to do this thing. And so because you've developed this expertise where you've become so good at this, it's really hard to say, okay, how do I give this to someone else and empower them and make sure that they're going to get the same result that I'm used to getting? And so that's another area I think managers struggle is they say, okay, here's how I did it. Let me show you once and go. And we don't invest enough in our people to make sure that they can perfect the skill or to learn their way into doing it the right way. So yeah, first it's a mindset shift to decide, are you going to give this up? Do you have a higher ceiling than just doing this yourself forever? And then second, we have to get into actually training and communicating the process, which I'm sure we'll talk a lot about.
Oh, yes. But I want to just stay on this mindset thing for 1 second, which is one of the things that helped me make that shift was when I made a list of all the things that I wanted to be doing that I didn't have time for right now.
Yeah.
And seeing that list on paper and being able to say, okay, well, if those are things I want to do, but I can't because I'm too overloaded, what are the things that I can let go of so I can make space for these other things? It can sometimes feel a little amorphous when it's like, I'm just so busy, I would love to delegate, but you don't even know what the opportunities are ahead of you. And as soon as you start to concretize those, it makes it a little easier to start to let go of some things because you have something to look forward to.
Yeah, it's easier to let go of the things if you've got something to fill the time. I totally agree with you. We created this little tool that started off as just a whiteboard. We called it the Delegation Planner. It was a whiteboard, then it was a spreadsheet, and it's something I've used for years and years. And it's really simple. It's just you make a sheet with columns that have each person on your team, or even just you if you're starting with just you, and you list out all of those responsibilities, the things that are on your plate, and you decide how many hours a week does this particular thing take. And so you need a snapshot of all the things that you're doing that fills your plate. And then you can decide, what should my plate look like 3 months from now, 6 months, 12 months from now? What do I want to be doing? And what are the things that I'm okay getting rid of? Would I be okay dropping these bottom three things if it meant I could double the time I'm spending on the top of the list? And so that's an exercise that any individual or new manager could go through is, where do I want to spend more time in the future? And then you realize, what do I need to take off my plate to enable that?
I love that. So simple and just paints that picture so clearly. All right, so let's shift into the process of delegation. And I should say, it's not just delegation, right? Sometimes it's creating consistency across processes or across your different team members, because you might have multiple people on your team who are all helping out doing something similar or working on the same process.
Yeah.
So it's not just necessarily one-to-one delegation, but sometimes it's around cohesion around the team and what work they're doing.
Yeah. I have this process, this framework: do it, document it, delegate it, which it's this really easy 3-step thing. And it reminds you that everything kind of starts as R&D. When you're growing a business, when you're doing a service for the first time, when you're working with a new type of customer, you don't really know what you're doing at the beginning. And so you need to refine it and try different things and see what sticks. But then at some point you realize, I'm doing this the same way every day, or I'm doing this the same way for every client. And so once you've done it and you're doing it consistently, now you're at a place where you can write down the recipe. And so a lot of people make the mistake of saying, hey, I'm going to hire you and I'm just going to give you this thing and expect you know how to do it. You haven't given them any recipe. You're just hiring someone and saying, go bake the cake, but I'm not giving you the recipe card, right? How could you expect it to come out the same? And so you have to go through this process of do it consistently, then document it, and then we can delegate it. We can hand off the instructions so that they can do it the same way you did it.
I'm really glad you started with the do it yourself piece, because sometimes we get excited about the future and we want to write a process or write how we think something should happen, even though we haven't actually done it yet. But it's like, okay, if I'm going to delegate this thing, it's new and I want it done a certain way because I know what's best. And then it's the kind of ungrounded in anything. It's grounded in theory or ideas. Can you share a little bit about what does that look like? Maybe you have a story about that, or kind of say more about why it's so important that we really do it and get it right before we document it.
Yeah. So I think you could add another D, which is design it. Before you get started, you may try to design it, and then you just realize that when you do it, your design was terrible. So my first company was a video production company, and I remember that we started getting bigger and bigger clients. And the first time we ever showed up in a big arena, I had this whole plan for how everything was going to work. And as we showed up, we start unloading the gear, and we realized that this was a union arena, and we didn't have the right people there to even unload the truck. And so we're stuck at the front door. And then we finally work through that problem and we start running the cable, and we realize that we don't have enough cable to get around all of the sections of chairs because we had to go behind all the chairs. And so sometimes you design something, you think it's going to be perfect, and then you're met with real world problems. And so until you do it, until you actually try it, you don't know if it's going to work. And so leaving that arena, Now we're able to say, okay, next time we're adding a step in our process we check, is this a unionized venue? What is the cable run situation? How far is power, so that we can pack the right kit? But you don't know that until you've been there and tried it.
Oh my gosh, what a great story and what a horrible experience to be in
Yes,
it, right?
plenty of those.
Okay, so let's say you've now been doing something for a while and you want to get into the document it part, because this is another part where I hear a lot of managers complain, I don't know how to explain what I'm doing, I just do it, or I don't have time to document it because I'm already so busy and that's going to just take too much time. It's just faster if I keep doing it myself.
Yeah.
Or even if I document it, who's going to look at it? Like, it's not a one and done thing that you can just read a SOP and move forward. So how do you think about the documenting so that it actually doesn't take forever and also is really usable by people?
So first, there's that question of, it's just easier to do it myself. And that's the scalability answer. That's like, am I going to do this forever? Okay, do it yourself. Am I ever going to show someone else how to do this? Why not start now? If you're going to start training other people, you should start now. And if you're going to train one person on how to do it, why not just write it down in a way that you can show multiple people? And so we have this phrase we use around the office, explain it once. Like, if you're going to explain it, record yourself explaining it. Explain it once. Actually, side story, I had someone from our investment firm reach out and ask if I could teach one of their other portfolio members how to run a board meeting. And so instead of getting on a call with him and teaching him how to run the board meeting, I created a video where I explained, here's my deck, here's the layout of how I run a board meeting. And now I can send that video to our investors to share with all of their portfolio companies. So if you're going to explain it once, why not do it in a scalable way? So that's the first thing. Next, I would say people get it feels daunting to document something if you think you have to write a novel, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But if you realize documentation is what we're doing right now, it's talking, it's video, it's screenshots with arrows, it's any way that you want to record something to show how it's done, that's documentation. And so maybe I just grew up with this through my video company, understanding multimedia documentation, but it's so easy to just hit record and show how you do something on your screen. And so that is documentation. And then the last thing that I would share, and interrupt me anytime if I'm oversharing here, but a lot of people document too simplistic of instructions because you take for granted all the little details that you know how to do because they come so naturally to you. And so when you're teaching someone that's new, they're going to have all these naive beginner questions that you need to be able to answer. And if your training doesn't include those questions, then of course they're going to make mistakes. And so I have a template that I use for documentation, and I can walk through it. It starts with just first, what are we training on? What's the process? That's the headline. Next, who owns this in the company? Like, who do I go to for questions? Who is responsible for ensuring this is done right every time? That's the owner. When was this last updated? So people know if this is a recent process or if it's time for change. And then you go through what I like to call the process metadata, which is, how often is this thing done in the business? Is this every Friday at 9 a.m.? Is this every time the phone rings? How often is it done? What is the time that I should expect this to take? So is this a 2-hour task? Is this a 8-hour task? Like, how many of us have assigned something to a new hire and been 3 days later like, well, you're still working on that? Oh my gosh, I totally forgot. Because it takes us 2 hours, we expect it'll take someone else the same. What are the tools that you need to do this effectively? So this is like hardware tools, software tools, passwords, document templates. And then what is the context of why this is important in the business? Like, who relies on this being done correctly? And so I think you need to train on all of those peripheral questions before you even get into step 1, do this, step 2, do this, step 3, because I've found that people really fail in the gaps between the steps and the things that they don't ever document.
I completely agree. And I have to say, like, I am notoriously bad at this, or was notoriously bad. I've gotten much better of delegating something and then having a team member reach out, and my team is, across the world. It'll be like 3 a.m. my time, and they're like, I can't access the template you sent over. Can you please change it to like share with everyone who
Share.
has the link kind of thing?
Yeah.
Right? Because we sometimes forget those little details. And so putting that up front into the template makes so much sense of just giving people all that information, and then allows them to actually absorb the steps of the process much better, because they're not also worried about, I don't understand how this connects to something, or how do I do this part of it? Where am I going to get that software access? Like, they know they already have those bases covered. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. So you also need to have a clear expectation for how long it's going to take someone to ramp up. And this is, changes for every type of business, for every industry. But, in some businesses, you might have an expectation that someone's working the register and processing orders by the end of the first day. In other businesses, you might expect it's a 2-week ramp up period. In other businesses, it might be a 90-day plan and you're 30, 60, 90 as you're getting started. And so I think everyone should be really intentional. Every manager and leader should be intentional about, in my department, in my company, what is a reasonable ramp up expectation? And then you give someone that as they're getting started so that they know, I'm not expected to be perfect on day one.
And in that time when they're in the ramp up, do you do things differently in terms of your oversight and your supervision and your support? Or are we really like allowing the training system we've set up to be the main focus, and then we're kind of coming in after those 2 weeks and checking up?
Yeah, so initially the training is something that they can consume async. So you want to give someone a healthy foundation of training so that they've seen it, they've been exposed to it. It's almost like you've read the textbook in school before class. You've done your homework. And then you can come into class, or you can come into your work, and the next step would be, let's see the job being done. Let's watch someone else, shadow someone else doing it. And then you shift into, let's have someone else that knows what they're doing shadow you doing the job. And then you move into the final stage, which is now you're ready to fly solo. Why don't you do that job? We'll talk about it later. And so it's a few stage process, but great training sets the stage for that to happen much quicker.
I like this so much. And in terms of the training itself, obviously you have a company with the platform. You can say a couple of words about that now. But then the bigger question really is, like, can we just make a Google Drive? Like, is that sufficient to put all these videos and just label them properly? Do we need to have something more robust? And how do we know what we really need so that we're giving people the right access to those materials?
It depends on the stage of the company. So a Google Drive is a perfect place to start. If you're just recording simple videos, making documents, it can be your Google Drive, it can be your OneDrive, your Dropbox folder, wherever you're putting all of your stuff. At some point in a team and company's growth, those materials get harder to manage, and you want to create more of an employee experience of what order do they go through these materials, and how do I want to drip these out as they progress in their career, as they approach their next promotion. And so that's when you would invest in more of a training or learning management system. And so Trainual, my company, is like a training manual. That's where the name came from, where you have all this material for your business, but then you get to create that sequence. You get to match, which roles, which locations, which teams need which knowledge. And then whether you're training someone more proactively or they're just searching for answers, you've got one hub for all that knowledge. So it's like your company university. But I would say it's definitely not necessary out of the gates. What you should start with is light documentation. Just have something if you don't already. And then as your team grows, as your company grows, and you want that centralized resource, that's when you graduate into a system like ours.
I like that we can just get started right away and take baby steps into it. Okay, actually, let's talk about what processes or what documentation should we be starting with? Like, is this just like I make my delegation list, I figure out what I need to get rid of, and I start there? Or are there other ways I should be thinking about what gets documented, even if it's not necessarily something I'm going to formally delegate right now, but maybe is, again, a process that multiple people on my team are doing, or there are a bunch of hands touching something, and it would be helpful to get some clarity around it?
I like to go macro to micro. And so when I talk about your business playbook, I have the 4 Ps. It's the profile of your company, the people in your company, your policies, and your processes. And so starting with the profile, this is what does everyone need to know that joins the business? What is your orientation about? What market are you serving? Which products and services do you offer? What's your why, your mission, your vision? What are your shared values that you all behave under? Do you have company principles? Do you have stories of milestones of your company progress as you've developed? Like that is your profile. If your business had a dating profile, that would be your profile. And so I think that is the place to start. And whether that's company wide or even on a department or team level, think about like, what would you want everyone on your team to know about the evolution of this department? When did this get created? What is our purpose across the whole organization? What do we do for customers here? And so start with that really macro lens of what does everyone need to know? And then you move down the line. So next would be people, because joining a new team, a new organization, you have to get to know your coworkers. And so what do you need to know about who's who, about who does what, about who reports to who? And so this is like your org chart, your roles and responsibilities, your bios, your individual owners of who owns which parts of the business, contact information, anything that you might need like that. Then you move down again, policies. So this could be macro like your handbook, but it could also be team policies. Like how do we operate with each other? If we Slack or, teams message each other, what is the expectation on how long it's going to take you to reply? How soon do we get back to emails? What's our SLA? Those are policies. And then you've got processes. And this is the most granular one because every person in a business is likely doing some different things. And so some of your processes you may just have defined as a responsibility on someone's plate. Other processes you might go really deep into an SOP of how to do this thing so we're all doing it consistently. But that's how I would approach this is first, what applies to everyone, and then what are the things that apply to the fewest number of people.
Such a different way of how most people approach documentation in general. I mean, I feel like it's so easy to want to jump into this is something I got off my plate, I'm going to document this first without ever pulling up to that level of why are we all here? What is that history and that context that actually can flow through all of our day-to-day work in a way that can be really meaningful and powerful if everyone knew about it?
If everyone knows your purpose and your vision and your mission and your values, in the absence of documentation for all the specifics, people can be directionally right. People can use their intuition, their experience, and they can have a sense of how should the company respond to this thing if there's no perfect recipe or perfect answer yet. But you should start with the big picture for sure.
I'm wondering if you have a story from your experience, from one of your clients, of what changed when they went through this process and attended to those 4 different Ps.
Well, I think the biggest thing that changes is you're building a very intentional culture where people know why they're there. If you're hiring people and handing them a list of responsibilities, it's very transactional. You're hiring people to do a task, and then they keep coming back to you asking for the next task. And it becomes this game of ping pong where you feel like, it's so much harder to manage people because I have to now do my work and continually come up with work for all these other people. But if you start with the why, if you hire someone and you give them the purpose of their role and you say, here's the impact that you're supposed to make across the business, then they can use some of their agency to fill their schedule and to come up with new ideas, and they don't become someone you have to micromanage. And so I think investing in that why up front saves you time in the long run.
I completely agree. And it makes your life so much easier in terms of when you're hiring, because you can, one, ground your hiring practices because now you have some documentation to pull from. And it allows you to spend less time, as where we started with, you don't have to repeat yourself every single time. So if only for the sake of making your life easier down the road, you can make those things once, and then every new employee gets to experience it. And it's so wonderful.
Yeah, it's also incredible too how many people have started at, whether it's at our company or customers of ours, and say, I've never had this kind of experience. Like, I have never had this intentionality behind getting me up to speed in the business. Our mission statement as a company is to help people at work get up to speed and stay up to date so that they're empowered, aligned, and productive. And when you think about the millions of people that are joining a new workforce and just feeling like, should I even be here? Does anyone know I'm here? What am I supposed to do? What does good look like? Who can I talk to? Like, it's uncomfortable to join a new business. And so what we have to do as managers is anticipate that and give people a smooth onboarding and a smooth welcome into the business.
Oh my gosh, if only. I'm like, yes, 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 yes. And that makes me think about all of the people who are on our teams right now who didn't get that. And how if we do these processes, if we document some things, they can still get the benefit, right? We can still
Yeah.
give it to them and they can still then go, oh, I was always wondering about that thing. Or, oh my gosh, now I have so much clarity around what our values are that I didn't even know. I didn't really understand before. So thank you. So
Yeah.
it really benefits everybody.
Yeah, it's re-energizing too. Anytime you relaunch something like that and admit that, okay, we didn't do this great in the past, but at this all hands meeting, at this company kickoff, whatever, we're now communicating this. Everybody's like, okay, I see what you're doing. And so you just have to stick to it. As long as it's not a one and done, it's got to be like, this is how we're now investing as part of our culture.
So let's just dive into this for one quick second, which is it's not a one and done. So you put these things together and then we have to revisit them every quarter. Are there particular moments or triggers that say, hey, we need to go back and update these things? Or we just kind of put it onto our calendar and do it when we have time?
I think it's both. So you can start with a time-based approach where, again, remember, every process has an owner. So it's somebody that's responsible for it. And so all process owners should be thinking on every 90 days or every new hire, I should at least take a cursory look at all of my stuff and make sure that it's still up to date, because you don't want to have to retrain people because you communicated incorrect information. And so at least at one of those two triggers, a new hire or every 90 days, I think it's worth a look. And that's where, again, a system like ours or others that have that built into it helps you with, okay, let's find and replace because we launched a new software tool or we swapped somebody out in this role. And so it updates everywhere that person was mentioned. Or, we have a new best practice and two people are doing it different ways. Let's reconcile those and pick which one is the newest version. That's more an issue with growing bigger companies. But yeah, as long as you're revisiting often, it's something that's living and breathing.
I have to share why. So I had my assistant when we hired a new assistant and she got promoted. She went through and updated all of the documentation that I had made for her because I was like, this is how I like my calendar managed. This is how I do my inbox. This is how I do travel and scheduling. And this is how I do all these things. And then she went and updated all of them before the new assistant came on. And I was like, this is magic because I didn't have to update any processes. And the processes that she had evolved were so much better than the ones that I gave her, in large part because I was always in my own head, right? I was the one who was like, I can always figure out which meeting takes priority or, what flight do I want based on everything else going on in my life. She was never going to know those things. So even my best version of documentation wasn't going to be nearly as good as what she had figured out on the job because she wasn't me. And so it was just great for then her to take that next step and keep it updated instead of me having to go back to do it.
I love that you said that. And one of the phrases I use is, instead of saying best practices, I make an effort to always say current best practices. And I think there's a small nuance here, and it tells everybody that we are always open to a new best practice. This is the way that we currently do things, but we're always open to a higher watermark of improving how this is done for the company.
Beautiful. All right. I think this is the perfect place for us to wrap up. So, Chris, where can people keep up with you? Remind us the name of your book and your company and all that jazz.
Yeah, so my book is The Business Playbook. You can find it anywhere online that books are sold. And the company is called Trainual, spelt like train, UAL, like a training manual. So I'd love to connect with anyone. You can find me at Chris Ronzio on LinkedIn and Instagram. Those are the two places I usually hang out.
Thank you again so much. I feel like we could have gone on forever because I have so many more questions and you cover so much good stuff in your book. So there's just a lot more to be said on this topic. But thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.